run the numbers. Everyone says it. What does it actually mean? Right? And I think it's kind of confusing for new people when, everyone talks about just run the numbers, figure out if it works or not. Just, figure it out, run the numbers, right? So what does it actually take to run the numbers on a rental property, for example, right? I guess we can make one on a fix and flip, but at least for a rental property, what do you need to know to be able to run those numbers, right? So first and foremost, you need to know your purchase price, right? And to go along with purchase price, is it rent ready? So are you just buying this place for, I don't know, let's just use a $100,000 house. Are you just buying this place for $100,000 and you can throw a tenant in there? Or are you buying it for, I don't know, maybe 60 grand and you got to put like 20 to 30 into it or whatever, right? Does it need rehab? So that is, I guess, number one that you would need to figure out. The next thing is, are you going to be buying this thing cash or financed, right? Because that's going to give you a completely different output on your rental return rate, if that makes sense. Next, you got to figure out your closing costs, and that can be an estimate, right? And then you want to know your taxes. And know your taxes, that doesn't just mean like, okay, figure out what they're paying, because maybe the house you're buying it from some people that lived in it, right? So when you buy it from someone that lives in it, that means it's homestead. If it's a non-homestead property, then your taxes are usually going to go up 30 to 40%, plus it gets uncapped with the sale. So your taxes are most likely going to be way higher than, not way higher, but much higher than what they currently are. So that's very, very important, right? Don't run your numbers using the taxes that the house is currently at. Next is insurance, right? Insurance on a house that you're going to live in, and insurance on a house that is a rental is completely different, and the rate of insurance is completely different. So just get a quick quote, right? Once you have a bunch of rentals, then you already know, like, okay, this house is worth this much, and it's probably going to be, insurance is going to be roughly around this area, right? Next, that's very important. You got to figure out your vacancy, your maintenance, utilities, capex, and management. So these are very, very important, right? One of the most important is management, because people are like, oh, I don't need to count that because I'm going to manage it myself. Well, are you going to work for free? Because if you work for free and you show that you're making a decent return, if you were to throw in management, your return would probably be garbage, right? So always calculate management, even if you are managing it yourself, because you want to pay yourself for doing it, right? It's not free. And then your rent rate, right? And you can figure out your rent rate, right? For that $100,000 house, maybe you can rent it out for $1,200, $1,300, $1,400, right? It just depends on the area. So you can do that by looking on any website or asking an agent and just pulling you some comps for, okay, it's a 3-bed, 1-bath with a basement and a garage, and it's 1,000 square feet. Perfect. Houses like that rent for X amount, right? Maybe they rent for $1,200 if they're, just grandma's old house that's clean, and maybe they rent for like $1,300 that's all redone, right? So then you can kind of figure out, like, if you're buying that house for $60,000, is it worth putting a bunch of money into it to make a new kitchen look nice and all that stuff, or is it better to just clean everything up, make it functional, maybe refresh it a little bit, reglaze countertops, paint cabinets, and get a much higher return, right? So I know I kind of threw out a bunch of stuff out there, but the easiest way I've found is there's calculators online you can use. I made my own, and I can send it to you if you'd like. It's just an Excel sheet that, calculates the stuff automatically, because I was sick of just doing it on paper over and over again. But I think if you're starting off, the best way to do it is just doing it by hand, right? So go out there and be like, okay, this house, I'm buying it for $100,000, perfect. And then you figure out if you're going to finance it or with cash. If you finance it, figure out what kind of terms you're going to get on it, right? You're probably going to have to put down 20 to 25%. If you're going to buy it with cash, maybe you're going to use hard money, or maybe you have the money. But if you buy it with hard money, figure out the terms that you're going to need to get. Figure out your closing costs. And that should be pretty simple. You can call a title company and be like, hey, what are my closing costs going to be on a house that's $100,000? And they'll be able to tell you. Taxes. You can call the city and be like, hey, I'm buying address XYZ and I'm paying this much for it. Can you give me an estimate on what taxes are going to be? Again, it's an estimate, but it's better than using the numbers that for the taxes that the house already is paying currently, if that makes sense. Next, insurance. Just call any broker. Be like, hey, I'm buying this house for this much. What's a estimate on a rate, right? Vacancy, maintenance, utilities, CapEx, and management. For management, you can just call it 8 to 10%. CapEx, well, that depends on how old everything in the house is, right? Is the furnace and the roof and the windows, are they original? Do you have to replace them soon? Or are they not, right? Utilities, if it's a single family house, most likely you shouldn't be paying any utilities, right? The tenant should be covering all that, but maybe, right? Who knows? Maintenance, that's usually like, I don't know, 3 to 5%, depending on, again, the house. But always run your numbers safe, right? So why not just charge 5%? And that's just money you're kind of taking out of the rent, throwing to the wayside for when things are going to break, because things always break. And vacancy, that depends on the area, right? 4, 8, whatever percent you decide to put in there, essentially to try to cover a month of the place being vacant, right? So again, depends on the area. Like if you're in an area that has a lot of movement, right, you can have a lower vacancy rating. If you're in an area that's kind of like more stagnant, you got to have a higher vacancy area, because in some places you really do need like a month to get a place filled up. And as far as the rent rate, I kind of cover that. You just kind of get an agent, figure out what everything's going for, and once you kind of run a few of these numbers and you stick to the same area, you can quickly look at, okay, the purchase price and the rent rate, right? Those are the most important. So you can look in that area and be like, okay, I know I can get $1,200 in this area. If I find a house for, I don't know, $80K, I'm going to get a pretty decent return. Or if I find a house for whatever, I'm going to get a really decent return, right? So once you run this a few times, then it becomes really easy, and you can just look at houses and know, like, okay, that house is worth this much, I can pay this much for it, and I can get this much return out of it. Because most of the other stuff that I talked about in the middle, that stuff's pretty much going to stay the same, more or less, right? So hopefully this helped. And if you are trying to figure out how to run numbers and you need a calculator, send me a DM or something. Just send me your email, and I'll send you over the calculator that I came up with. Again, there's apps and all sorts of calculators online, but if you want an Excel sheet that I made, then I can send that over to you. It's pretty simple. You just plug in some numbers and it gives you out a return. It's pretty simple. I was going to say it's pretty cool, but it's just simple. So anyway, hopefully this helped, and that is what we mean by running numbers on a rental. Have a good one. Should run numbers on buying a new button. That would be pretty sweet.